Every publisher wants a bigger slice of ad revenue. But in retail, growth isn't just about selling more ads. It's about proving those ads actually drive incremental sales. That's why retail media networks and commerce media networks are the hottest battlegrounds in digital advertising right now. The opportunity is massive, but only if you can connect the ad spend to their business outcomes. I'm James Deaker, the Yield Doctor, and today we're going to be doing a deep dive into how to drive that growth with Danilo Tauro. Danilo has a unique series of experiences. He was the Global Director of Media, Tech, and Data at Procter & Gamble. He was the Head of Product for Amazon Ads for Connected TV first, and then later for Holding Co. agencies. And he was the general manager at Uber Eats Advertising globally. He is currently a managing partner at Cartography AI, a company at the intersection of startup accelerator and enterprise matchmaking in ad tech and martech. Danilo, that's a mouthful. I am so pleased that we have the chance to sit down and talk today.
James, thank you so much for having me. Very excited for this.
Excellent. Now, let's start with the basics. Retail media network and commerce media network, in some cases, the terms get used interchangeably. So how do you define a commerce media network versus a retail media network? And in particular, what are the key differences in the business models, and where do you see them each having the right to win?
Yeah, I love to start there. So we start with definition. So I think of retail media networks as basically media monetization that's fundamentally anchored inside of the retailer's shopping experience. So it's basically digital shelf, if you think of it. So you have like sponsored products, sponsored brands, on-site placements. It's very close to conversion. So the business model is relatively straightforward, if you want. So you have auction dynamics, high intent, and measurable outcomes. I think when you think of commerce media networks, to me, they are broader because basically they monetize commerce signals and commerce experiences, often, I would say, beyond just the shelf and sometimes even beyond a single retailer. So this is where basically it gets harder because basically if your commerce media network pitch is just, hey, we have first-party data, that's not enough anymore because basically the differentiation has to come from consumer experience that feel, I don't know, native, useful, not interruptive banners, basically. So they really need to be integrated with moments that actually add value and connect to what the consumer is trying to do. So basically, you asked about the right to win, and I think RMNs, they win when they have the right assortment, traffic, conversion, etc. So it's basically the store is the media. I think CMN, commerce media, they win when they can really create new high-performing ad experiences, which basically can improve outcomes across context, not just on-site, I would say.
I want to double click in this because I have used a different definition, which is not to say yours isn't correct, but help talk me through this. Because when I've thought of retail media networks, I've almost thought of it as a subset of commerce in the sense that retail for me is more directly people who sell usually physical goods. So if Amazon or a Walmart or a Safeway, Albertsons, Target, those to me are companies who are retailers who have extended into having retail media networks. Whereas I've thought about other commerce media networks as just being sort of a broader category of other, honestly, more service-oriented companies, your Marriotts, your Uniteds, Expedias, etc., and thought of them as being the companies that be more focused on commerce media networks. So that's how I've thought about it. How can you match up how I'm describing it versus the definition that you've used?
Yeah, I think the way you described it is 100% correct. And I like also the cluster that you built, because ultimately you have commerce media network, which is this bigger bucket in a way. Then within commerce media network, you have a smaller one, which is actually making more money though, which is the retail media network, which is exactly, you have a marketplace. So you have the buyer that enters the marketplace with a high intent to buy something. And so this is exactly where it's, I would say, easier to monetize the type of intent, because basically, merchants want to be on top when there is a keyword search, and then they're willing to pay. So there is the CPC, so the search business model with the CPC. So I agree with you, retail media network, you may say, is a subset of commerce media network, but then that subset, I would say it's easier to monetize because of all the reasons that we discussed.
Okay, brilliant.
The marketplace, is there a marketplace, yes or no? If yes, it's a retail media network and it's easier. If it's not a marketplace, then it becomes a bit more tricky to monetize because, again, video display, it's a more competitive space. So the absence of that marketplace in the broader sense of commerce media network, that's what makes the overall business model different.
Okay. Both retail media networks and commerce media networks are growing fast, but obviously not without friction and challenges. From your perspective, what are the biggest opportunities and biggest challenges that they both face right now?
Yeah, so I would split it. So that's why I love to start from definitions. So I think if we start with a broader category, right? So commerce media network. So I think the biggest opportunity is really to unlock budgets exactly beyond the shelf, and these are like video, native, sponsorship, offsite, even creators, I would say. And so then the real challenge is how you get off the ground with real differentiation in this space, because as we just said, display and video are brutal categories, right? So it's difficult to differentiate. So the question becomes, what experience can you create that people don't tune out? What outcomes can you prove that others can't? And also to the buyers, to the brands, how can you differentiate? Because a banner is a banner, a video is a video. Yes, first-party data, but again, how do you differentiate? What experience can you create? I think when we move to retail media networks, again, much more targeted, and again, based on the marketplace and all the good stuff that we said. So I think the early growth is almost mechanical in a way, right? So you drive merchant penetration, you increase ad spend as a percentage of basically gross merchandise value, you reduce the churn. But my point is, once you hit the plateau, once you're at basically, penetration and decent yield, where does the next wave come from? And so this is where basically I see the biggest opportunities. So this is like, I don't know, new formats, sponsorships, offsite. If you think CTV, and CTV, there are players that went very hard on CTV. Take Amazon. They started with as a traditional, maybe the first retail media network, but then Amazon has, I would say, structural advantages. They have Fire TV, they have Prime Video. So for them, it was very natural to go to CTV. If you look at Walmart, they kind of bought Visio, so the CTV operating system. So I would say similar to Amazon Fire TV. But I think the challenge is if you don't have those, let's call them unfair advantages. So how do you partner smartly and still create a credible next chapter of growth beyond traditional retail media network?
So let's stay on this, on the sort of the growth opportunities, because I get asked a lot, and therefore I'm sure you get asked a lot. There are so many retail media networks and commerce media networks. Are they all going to survive? How do they keep growing? And I've talked about the fact that when the original ad networks sort of started around 2000 through 2005, many of them reached a sort of plateau around $200-300 million, and very few broke through to the next level. You could argue that ad.com was an outlier. And so I think there is this challenge for retail media networks to the point you're making. They monetize their own site, they do a reasonable job, and they start to reach some ceilings, and they either have to create new inventory or, to your point, go off network. So as you think about those particular areas, what if you were running a retail media network? Let me ask a specific question. What would you do when you start to reach those thresholds? And if the answer is something like go off network, what does that mean in your world?
Yeah, and I think offsite is one area. And I think, I love this question because it kind of builds on the previous one. And I think there are different growth vectors. So I think offsite, again, is one of them. And, you can think CTV, etc. But then I think, what about data products, for example. So how can you monetize your data better? How do you think about sponsorships? And I like sponsorships because sponsorships could be something that you do digitally, or you also, think of out of home, digital out of home, physical, etc., which is something that marketers are asking more and more. So brands are asking for this blend of, they call it phygital, which I don't know if it's a word that I like, but it's really physical plus digital. So again, that's a thought as well. Or if you think also the influencer space, we know many brands are doubling down on the influencer creator type of commerce, digital commerce. So I think that's another vector. If you think of, we mentioned experiences, so think of richer on-site experiences. So I think those are all things, all vectors that they can explore. And again, I think these are kind of underappreciated, areas that if you start with merchant centricity, then I think it becomes much easier to understand what are the experiences, what are the formats that can add value to the merchants, to the consumers, and so on. So that's why what I'm trying to say is like most merchants also, they don't want to be also media buyers, right? So they don't want to understand all the details about how this thing works, but they want to build good experiences for the consumers. They want to convert. So I think this is almost like a new mantra, which is how do I think of the merchants at the center and all the experiences I can build for them. So that's a bit I would think about the next wave of growth.
You threw so much at me. I'm going to have at least a couple of different follow-up questions just on this. The first is when you use sponsorship in this context, sponsorship can mean different things in different people. In some contexts, it just means like a takeover of the site or a takeover of the app for a day, or it can mean something broader. As you're using the term sponsorship in this context, what does it mean?
Yeah, so spot on. So I think the takeover, which is, you open the app, there is a big ad, and maybe connects to a specific, I don't know, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, or maybe it's the, Taco Day or the Donut Day. My wife is Polish, I learned there is a Donut Day. So what I'm trying to say is like, definitely there is the takeover type of sponsorship, but that's why, again, you can think beyond, which is how do you think of sponsorship outside of your app? Think of, if people that follow the sport, for example, is there a specific sport event you can connect, you'll be in front of your couch, you want to get, for example, online food delivery. So as you're looking at your game, your match, there is a banner, there is a QR code. So my point there is so much that can be taught in terms of sponsorship in the real world, in the digital world, and in the real world. So I think I would really invite Retail Media Network to think outside of the box. So not just the single takeover, the simple, straightforward takeover, but everything that, again, has to do with the experience of the consumer in a way.
All right. The second follow-up was one of the ideas you talked about, which was data product sale. And again, that can also mean different things. I think it is a natural thing for retail media networks and commerce media networks to think about, because often they have very good data, but their opportunity for advertising, the space that they have available on their own site, can be very limited, or in their app. And so when you think about that, talk to me about what that means, because I can think of at least 3 different flavors, but I'd rather hear your flavors than mine in terms of what a data sale looks like. Who might they work with? And does it involve actually selling the data, or does it just mean creating different segments that their sales team would sell?
Yeah. I love this question. I was having a similar discussion with the CMO of one of the largest luxury brands a few weeks ago in Orlando. There was the A&A Masters. So we're discussing exactly this point. And I think there is the programmatic way to think of data, which, to be honest, for me, it's a bit outdated, which is, programmatic, started 20 years ago. And I think the question is, how do we evolve that thinking? What I mean with that is, in my mind, it's not really about selling the data. So the discussion I was having with the CMO is, if you think of first-party data, for example, your own first-party data are important, but they become much more powerful when you can match them with other people's first-party data. So now we enter the space of privacy, et cetera. And the point is, and that's why I love a lot the space of clean rooms. So what I'm trying to say is, like, for me, it's not about, let's sell the data and do targeting. Again, that's 20 years ago. For me, the thinking is, okay, I'm a brand, or I'm a retail media network, I have first-party data. Can I build alliances where I know, for example, whoever is watching a specific movie, whoever is buying food from a specific restaurant, whoever is purchasing specific items on retail media. So can I understand a purchase behavior? Can I then match make and build experiences? Could be joint experiences. So that's why, long story short, what I'm trying to say is like the thought is how can I think of first-party data partnerships which then get activated in a compliant way, for example, via data clean rooms. That's what I meant a lot when I talked about data. So it's more like innovative ways to monetize data in a way that ultimately also add value to the final consumer. So it's not just the basic retargeting.
Interesting. So let me talk through it. You know, I do a lot of these interviews, so I learn more. I have thoughts. Sometimes they're wrong. In the instance you're talking about, the clean room would be set up by the retail media network with primarily their own first-party data. It doesn't sound like you think of the use case of sharing across lots of retail media networks as being the primary one in the short term. And it would be set up for each advertiser to activate against the data set up in that clean room. Is that how you're thinking about it?
For example, yes, 100%. And then it could be exactly. So you have a clean room, which is the Switzerland, if you will. And then it could be a clean room, which is owned by the retail media network, or it could be a third-party clean room where basically advertisers and retail media network put data in, and then you can query the data, you get insights, you drive the activation. So that's the type of business model that I think could be very successful, because ultimately, again, as we started, and this was the discussion with the CMO, your own first-party data are important up to a certain point. When you can have data partnerships, this is when it becomes very, very powerful. And again, to give very specific examples, right? Imagine you have an airline company and you know who is flying a business of first class. And the other side, you have, a luxury company and you know who is buying, very expensive jewelry. So now imagine the 1 + 1 = 3 that can be done there, right?
And talk to me more about the use case. So I'm a retail media network. I put my data in the clean room. An advertiser, let's say Procter & Gamble, wants to use it. Are they using it primarily in my network, or are they using their DSP to then use that data to buy across different publisher sites? And if so, what might the economics look like? Because when I put that data into the clean room, I'm giving them an enormous boon, right? I'm giving them something very valuable. Do you think about it as being a one-time fee? Do you think about it as being the number of segments that they use? Give me a sense for how the economics might work.
Yeah, and I think the economics are very interesting because ultimately with the data clean room, you're no longer paying for the data, right? Because you're more paying for the queries, etc. You can have a flat fee, you can have a data sharing where you're saying, hey, I'm, as you said, putting my own data in your clean room as a value in itself for you, right? So I think there are different types of agreements that can be done. And those agreements, let's be very transparent, will depend also on the size of the retailer versus the brands and how premium those audiences are, how scarce those audiences are. So I think it's difficult to categorize exactly how that agreement should be structured. But my point is, so one, there are many different dimensions that should be analyzed. But then the second thought for me is also, it's not just about the targeting in, on site of site. Again, I would go also broader than that, which is if we think about sampling, for example, if we think about emails. So that's why I keep pushing for what are all the experiences that can be activated when you can monetize or leverage better your data.
So I don't know which question I want to ask you first. Whether I ask you about partnerships. No, I want to stay on this this question of the growth limits of the retail media network. Do you see a world where, as different retail media networks hit this cap that I'm asserting will be there, that we will see a network of ad networks, a network of retail media networks start to grow up around specific verticals? Or do you think that historically that's just been too hard to sort of make the pieces work with all the different incentives in place?
So love the question, and I think so if we look at the dynamics, I think retail media network, I think they're better positioned because ultimately they will get the adoption and the spend based on the fact that they have merchants on the platform. These are endemic advertisers, etc. The challenge is, okay, what happens with commerce media networks, right? But again, I think, do I believe they will create networks, ad networks? I don't know if necessarily ad networks, but what I believe is a trend that is starting is the idea of, if you look how media, commerce media, retail media is bought today, there is almost a silo because you have programmatic spend, programmatic media buying, where you buy display and video through a DSP, etc. And then on the other side, you have, for example, sponsor listing. And sponsor listing, you have specific companies where you can aggregate retail media networks and you buy on keyword CPC versus programmatic, you buy audience CPM. So my point is there are silos. So what I'm trying to say is to accelerate that growth, is there a way to get new demand? So as a retail media network, you can access programmatic demand, which is not possible today, because again, one is CPM and audience based, the other one is CPC and keyword based. But my point is, can we create a space where we have a programmatic buying of retail media network? So I think this is a space where I think we'll hear a lot in the next future. And I've heard a few companies are taking some steps, building like a RMN kind of RTB protocol. And I think this is a space that I'm personally also investigating a bit.
Excellent. So let's stay then on partnership strategies, because often a retail media network is not the primary business of the retail. In fact, I would say always it's the secondary business. There are often resources are in short supply. You have to work out what you're going to build yourself versus partner. When you think about sort of some of the key partnership decisions for retail media networks build versus buy, how do you think about the partnership decisions?
Yeah. So I would say I'm very opinionated here. So, and my point is, I'll take a step back because I would say in a world that's basically, this VUCA, which is a word that was invented maybe 20 years ago, but I think it's still very compelling today. So VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? So optionality is a strategy. Actually, fun fact, my PhD is actually in real options valuation, which is in a world where there is a lot of uncertainty, building flexibility as a value, but then that flexibility has a cost. So how much are you willing to pay for that flexibility? But anyway, that's a longer discussion. But I'm a big fan of optionality. So optionality as a strategy. And so my point is, you don't want to kind of overbuild the wrong thing and then you get stuck. So my rule of thumb is build what creates durable differentiation, but then also partner for capabilities where specialists are already ahead, and basically they will stay ahead, and it's going to be difficult to, it's going to be expensive to build yourself, right? So if you think of stuff like, I don't know, measurement, clean rooms, creative formats. Now, if you think of the Gen AI, etc., this offsite, do you really need to build a DSP? Yes, if you're Amazon, you have the scale to do it. But think of, again, CTV integration. So there is a lot where I think you can focus on the core and partner for the rest. So that's why I'm saying I would say the key is really designing a modular stack. So basically you can, plug and play, you can swap components as the market evolves, because again, there is so much uncertainty that you'd better have that flexibility. And so then when you select partners, I think what you should look at is really pragmatic stuff. It's like, okay, what job are they best in the world at, right? Do they have, I don't know, proof of outcomes? Can they integrate cleanly? What are the APIs? And, what are the incentives? We talked about the business model right before, right? So how do they monetize? How do we align basically adoption to performance? So it's not just you're buying software, but how do you create a strong long-term partnerships? And then you have that flexibility. And maybe the last thought I would add is it's also basically, in my mind, this build versus buy, it's really like how do you take an ecosystem approach, right? Because again, you need to find the right vendors. So you need to vet basically what partners really fit the job to be done for your strategy. But then you need to understand, what constraints you have, what timeline, are they committed? How do you build differentiation if you're partnering? So those are a bit the type of questions. But I think, yes, I like the idea of partner for anything that is not core, or partner on the new bets, and then you can always in-house later in a way.
No, 100% agree with you. I have been in position of having to previously talk companies out of trying to build their own ad server or build capabilities that already exist in the market and really push on, do you really need to differentiate in this area? But staying on that, and again, another area I hadn't necessarily intended to go, as you think about sequencing as a retail media network grows over time, often we see they start out with a sales team and maybe no programmatic. It's pretty small operation, and they're working with a couple of advertisers. And as they grow, they start to do some programmatic, and then they have to start to think about offsite. What if you were starting in a retail media network from scratch? What would be the top 2 or 3 technology decisions that you would make at the start, and then what are the subsequent decisions that you think that you have to make?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely, I would say if we are a retail media network, then the point is, you want to have sponsor listings that work. So if you think of the, auction mechanics, etc., etc. So I think the ad server would definitely be the top one decision by far that I would make. If you're more like a commerce media network, then you're more in the kind of video display programmatic space, and then I would start thinking, okay, what is my programmatic tech stack, sell side, and then from there I would also say what is my creative tech stack in a way, because I think now there is a lot of convergence of media and creative. So I would say retail media, definitely ad server for the sponsor listing logics, etc. So quality score, bidding, and so on. I think if you're a commerce media, I would really think the programmatic tech stack and the creative tech stack.
Brilliant. And while you're on sort of tech stack, how do you think about the integration of the data layer? Because you've got sort of your business reporting, you've got the data segments that we've talked about. Is that sort of something that you worry about a year or 2 down the road once you've actually got some products up and running? Or is that like a first class thing that you actually have to be thinking about on day one?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, and the reason why I didn't mention it as one of the critical decisions at the beginning is because my thought would be there. How do you make synergies? And what I'm trying to say is like, if you think of all these retail media networks, commerce media networks, etc., they're usually launched as a business within a business. But again, there is a larger business, and likely it's a tech business, and they already have a data strategy. They already have made some decisions from a data standpoint. So what I'm trying to say is like, yes, it needs to be a business within a business because you need the agility, you need to be able to be nimble, etc., etc. At the same time, you need to make sure that you leverage the broader capabilities. So I think data is a space where I think, you can definitely also try to understand what already exists, and then you can basically start by leveraging what is already there.
Brilliant. When you think about the metrics that matter, my experience in retail media network, and it was kind of eye-opening to me, is you have to have a different relationship as a publisher to your advertisers. And frankly, you have to care more about their performance. I don't know if I used quite these words at the time, but some publishers I've worked for, if an advertiser fell away, you knew that there'd be 10 more, 100 more in the queue sitting behind them. The advertisers for a retail media network are often the same people you're working with in your core business, and they matter more, and their performance matters more. When you think about the metrics that matter for retail media networks, what are the top things that come to mind?
Yeah, so I would say when you think specifically retail media network, so I think ROAS is the key metric that gets discussed, etc. And so my point is also here I'm very opinionated, and I think RMNs overall, I think that they've outgrown a bit their early days, right, where they had like untapped demand, and so it means that every dollar spent was both basically high ROAS, high incrementality. So today, focusing only on ROAS incentivizes, I think, behaviors that may appear efficient, but in reality, they are kind of harming long-term profitability and growth. So what I'm trying to say is like ROAS today can be gamed, and this is problematic, right? Because basically you can, for example, overspend on retargeting or branded keywords, and basically these tactics, they drive high ROAS, but at the same time, they basically focus on customers who are likely to convert anyways, and so they result in low incremental growth. Or for example, you can drive discount-driven sales. So you can have discounting, this will boost ROAS by generating short-term revenue, but lower margins as well, right? So basically what you're doing, you're attracting low LTV, lifetime value customers. So what I'm trying to say is like there are ways to gain ROAS, and I think the key question is, is it good for the long term, or actually these behaviors lead to, again, shrinking new customer cohorts. You increase the reliance on discounts and reduce the margins. You lower the customer lifetime value. So I think there are many negative effects. So that's why, long story short, chasing ROAS at all cost can actually lead to slower growth and declining margin. And so my point is efficiency metrics like ROAS are necessary, but also must be balanced in a way with effectiveness metrics that focuses really on long-term outcomes. So if you think, for example, of, again, we mentioned lifetime value. So can you measure the total revenue contribution from the full price customers, basically they get acquired over 6 months? Can you measure, again, incremental ROAS, so incremental revenues from non-brand keywords, basically? So you track the revenues that are generated from new demand sources. So that's why I'm saying, again, ROAS is an excellent efficiency metric, but then it's a bit of a poor North Star. So as I'm saying, striking the right balance between efficiency and effectiveness, which is what brands always try to do, will basically ensure that the business scales sustainably, but also maintains the margins.
I love how opinionated you are. So I'm going to ask you another one where you may have a strong opinion. Given what you just said about the importance of ROAS to the key customers, most retailers have the partners that are absolutely critical to them. Should they be prioritizing them higher in sort of their ad serving stack, giving them access to unique inventory on their site? Or do you think that at the end of the day, all partners should be treated equally within a retail media network?
Yeah, so I think there are two types of partners, right? So we have the endemic partners, which are also the merchants. And so these are people that actually drive the core business in a way, right? And then you have the non-endemic partners. They are not merchants. So then the question is, do they compete for the same attention? I would say yes, definitely, But then do you need to give more importance to one or the other? I think ultimately reality is merchants, at least based on my experience and what I've seen around, merchants would always be anyway the biggest part of your revenues. And I think when people go to non-endemic, that's more like an add-on. So they can be very important again, but it's more like an add-on. So if you think of how you build your strategy for kind of endemic versus non-endemic, I think the first thing is make sure that you take care of your merchants, because ultimately they are both advertisers and again, they drive the core business. So I think definitely there is more attention there in a way.
Talk to me about sort of the tension between advertisers and merchants and the sort of overall site experience of selling product when you're setting up a retail media network, because clearly there is a lot of margin associated with the retail media network, but there's a balancing act. How have you seen that balancing act work in practice?
Yeah. So ultimately, as a technical person, I'm sure you like all the concept of portfolio optimization, right? This is, in my mind, a perfect case of portfolio optimization, right? So, and I think there are two tensions here. So from one side, it's what we touched upon, which is basically merchants are also advertisers. And this is a delicate balance, because basically, do you want to maximize ad revenues? And what if at the same time, basically, again, the merchant is not performing? What I mean is you have late deliveries, you have the wrong offers, etc., etc. Are you still willing to get them to advertise and win the next order if that you're making advertising revenues, but you're also hurting the business in a way, right? So my point is, if you think the Google quality score, which basically says, okay, if your quality score, your page relevance is lower, you need to bid much higher. So how do you set up your auctions? That's why it goes back to the ad server, the capabilities, etc. How do you set up the auctions where it's not just the highest bid wins, but in commerce media, basically in retail media, the platform should also kind of score the value to the business and the customer experience. So again, if a merchant is unreliable, late deliveries, bad service, high returns. So do you really want to amplify them because they bid aggressively? Probably not, right? So then you want to bid and optimize basically against a broader value function. So merchant quality, margin impact, customer satisfaction, long-term retention, and so on and so forth. On the other side, you have, I think, what you were hinting at, James, which is you have this duopoly, right? There are the merchants, the endemic advertisers, and the non-endemic, right? And this is also delicate because ultimately they compete for the same attention, right? They compete for the same inventory. And besides sponsor listing, for if you think on-site and off-site, that's the same, right? So the question then is, are they complementary? How do you architect the marketplace in a way that is well balanced, right? So that then you have the large brands, they still benefit from the contextual space, the data, etc. But then the merchants are more focused on conversion. So I think that's a bit the balance that need to be built.
Thank you. Just one or two more questions, and I hadn't intended to ask it, but I have to ask it about AI and the impact that we're seeing. Everybody talks about where they think it's going to have impact. I'd be interested, you and I are talking here at the end of 2025, where are you actually seeing impact? Not about where people think it may be impacting, but where it's actually being used within commerce and retail media networks. And if the answer is you're not seeing it, there's a signal there for me as well. So let me know.
Yeah, so I think there are also here kind of, the low-hanging fruits and the big vision. And to be honest, many of the discussions that I'm having, they include, of course, AI discussions. And what I'm trying to say is like low-hanging fruit. I mean, we just talked before a bit about, the creative piece. So again, there were a couple of PRs in the last couple of weeks, and they talk about large retailers. Again, I will not mention any names, not to promote or advertise any company, but they were at the large retail media networks that struck partnerships with these Gen AI, production companies, Gen AI creative companies. So they can do like production, they can do adaptation, they can do personalization, and you put a prompt, you get an image, or you put a prompt, you turn an image into a video, and you can do personalization. So I think it's fantastic, right? And so you think you're a retail media network, you have a long tail or small advertisers that actually don't have that capability in-house or cannot afford paying agencies. So I think very low-hanging fruit is Gen AI for creative. So I think that's easy. Then you can actually push it much more. So if we go up, to the long-term vision, if you look at how many retail media networks are structured today, you have a lot of silos. So you have advertising, you have offers, you have sponsor listing, you have sponsored brands, you have offsite. So what I'm trying to say is like merchants specifically, which again contribute to the largest portion of revenues, they don't want to be traders, right? They want to drive their business. And ideally, if you have a capability to say, okay, give me your budget, give me the metrics you're optimizing for. Do you want, again, incremental ROAS? Do you want new customers? Do you want, you have a budget, you have a KPI, and then the retail media network can optimize everything in the background. So it's really, you need to have the AI to understand how to bring everything together. So it's ads plus offers, it's on-site, it's off-site, it's the right creative, etc., etc. So this is where AI, again, the creative piece can be done today. I think this broader vision where you bring everything together and you really meet the merchant where they are, I think this is going to be the big disruption for retail media networks.
I love it. Partly you're butting up against something we used to call holistic yield management or full page monetization. It's what everybody tries to do, and it's been incredibly difficult up until now. I agree. It's probably one of those areas that I think AI is primed to be able to help. I haven't seen that occur yet. I think that we will start to see that in the next year or two, and I think you're right on that. Danilo, this has been so amazing. Thank you for taking the time. What is the best way for people to follow you and follow up on all the amazing things that you're doing?
Very active on LinkedIn, so that's my favorite social network. So definitely happy to connect with people on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you for taking the time, and I'm sure you and I will spend some time together in the future. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you for having me, James.